This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and before we even get to the May jobs numbers and the implications of those numbers, I wanted to get Scott the Cow Guy Shellady's take on the Elizabeth Warren Tucker Carlson 2020 ticket and their platform of economic nationalism. Tucker Carlson summing up his argument. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, summing up his argument in favor of Elizabeth Warren's industrial policy platform.
Our leadership class remains resolutely libertarian, committed to the rhetoric of markets when it serves them, utterly libertine on questions of culture. Republicans will lecture you about how payday loan scams are a critical part of our market economy. Then they'll work to make it easier for your kids to smoke weed because, hey, freedom. Democrats will nod in total agreement. They're on the same page. Just last week, the Trump administration announced an innovative new way to protect American workers from the ever-cascading tidal wave of cheap third-world labor flooding this country. Until the Mexican government stops pushing illegal aliens north over our border, we will impose tariffs on all Mexican goods that we import. Now, that's the kind of thing you might propose to protect your country if you cared about your people. The Democrats, of course, opposed it. They don't even pretend to care about the American people anymore. Here's what Republicans said.
Look, I think it's safe to say you've talked to all of our members. We're not fans of tariffs. We're still hoping that this can be avoided.
We're not fans of tariffs. Imagine a more supercilious, more out of touch, more infuriating response. Well, you can't because there isn't one. In other words, says Mitch McConnell, the idea may work in practice, but we're against it because it doesn't work in theory. That's the Republican Party 2019. No wonder they keep losing. They deserve it. Will they ever change?
Well, Tucker Carlson is wrong about as many different ways as you can be wrong, his whole riff in support of what Elizabeth Warren proposed. He's not wrong in terms of some of his criticism of the Republican Party and their elitist attitudes, the establishment of the party. However, his last sentence there prior to calling for rethinking of the Republican Party and the direction of mercantilism, it may work in practice, but it doesn't work in theory. No, in point of fact, increasing taxes, which is what imposing tariffs is, doesn't work in practice. It is not pragmatic, Tucker, even though Trump's using it to saber rattle with respect to Mexico on the prospect of aid for border security, looks to have been successful if he accepts victory. But, I mean, this whole Tucker Carlson fusion with Elizabeth Warren on economic patriotism to get some social conservatism is replete with danger. We'll tackle at least the economic patriotism piece of it with our friend Scott the Cow Guy Shellady. Scott Shellady, Fox Business contributor, joins us now. Scott, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Desire to stick it to our enemies or those we don't feel like are doing enough to advance American interests, regardless of sort of the soundness of the fundamentals or the unintended consequences. That's certainly the case with tariffs, and I wonder how you see Trump positioning trade policy with respect to both China and now with Mexico.
Well, believe it or not, I'm more concerned about the Mexican one. I think that, obviously they're supposed to be a friend. Maybe he can get them in the line with the tariffs. I mean, he'll be looked as a hero if the gamble works, and it's like punting from your own 30, right? I mean, this is what it smells like to me, or trying to block a punt, or do a fake play, because it could be successful, and he might claim victory, like you just said. But here's what I don't like about it, and I've been thinking long and hard for a while, because I'll sign up to his policies, right? Most of his policies to date. If you take his name off the top of the page, they've been very good for the economy, right? And if you can get rid of your Trump derangement syndrome, you'd have to agree that things have gotten markedly better, and the numbers don't lie. They tell us that, right? A 3%, 3.1% GDP, and the likes. But he's taken that success, and he's trying to leverage it, but he starts to get a little bit blind about it in my terms. And I hate to say this because I'm old enough to know, but he's done this before, and it's failed. And he did it in 1986 with the USFL. They had 2 or 3 years of decent successes with spring football. Owners were doing okay. I mean, it wasn't a massive success, but it was strong. It was going okay. And he decided to take on the NFL and antitrust. And he won, but he lost, right? The league had to fold. He sued him in court and got $1 in damages. And it's like he's almost taking that stance again. We've got a decent economy, and he's going to, he's like a dog with a bone. He's not going to let this go. I like the idea of making China, trade with the world freely, and I'd like to see the border tightened up on our south, but we have to be very careful about at what cost and where we're going to, how far we're willing to take this, because he has a history of taking it too far, and that is where I'm concerned. And unfortunately for him, you're starting to see the tide turn in the economic numbers as well.
And the Warren proposal that Tucker Carlson is trumpeting includes something that Tucker Carlson and others were railing against when China was doing it. Let's weaken the dollar to engineer a pro-U.S. export strategy the way that the Chinese did for the first 15 years of this century. Is that a good idea?
No, it's garbage. It's like playing hot potato. You're just exporting inflation. I mean, it's just passing the hot potato. Yeah, it works for a little while, but it's not sound growth. It's like you have to actually engineer economic growth, not engineer some sort of short-term candy high, which that would be. You making your dollar cheaper, or your own currency, whomever you are as a country, cheaper. You're just going to be exporting that inflation out to the rest of the world, and it'll come back around at some point in time, and then you'll have to cheapen it again. I mean, at what point does that stop? I know they do it in the hopes that at some point in time, here comes this knight in shining armor around the corner that's going to rescue your economy, because that's really why they only do it. Because they do know if they do it long enough, it'll come back to them, and they'll have to do it again. But if that knight in shining armor doesn't come around the corner, what are you going to do? I mean, I absolutely don't believe in that. I think that that's a short-term high, and it doesn't work in the long term.
All right, Scott Shellady, May job numbers are out. Employers added only 75,000 jobs in May, and unemployment steady at 3.6%. How do you react to that news?
Stinky.
Stinky.
It's stinky.
Is that an economics term?
Is that a hashtag?
You'll have to look up. Everybody can go to their financial glossary and look that term up. But it's not good, because we had an ADP jobs number that really was bad on Wednesday. We've got a growing economy, but growing slower than we thought. We've got manufacturing numbers that says that we're still expanding, but expanding slower than we thought. And if you've got the Fed that's willing and ready to fight to keep the stock market higher, which they came out and said on Monday, which I can't believe, the Fed's now part of keeping the stock market is a pricing mechanism. It's not an economic recovery mechanism. Okay. This is all starting to get really muddled and really it's not smelling very well. And now he's got his own economic numbers that are coming in weaker than expected. And I'm sorry, but if he starts to cut rates, but cheap money, fiat money, capital around the world that comes to you easily is actually a detriment to production. It doesn't help production, and it's a long and involved reasons why. But these aren't healthy signs. So I think that the flashing yellow signs that I sensed probably 3 or 4 weeks ago are flashing much brighter and louder now, because we have to have some clarity on these Chinese and Mexican tariffs. And May 10th to me was a watershed. That said to me, the Chinese and the U.S., this is going to take a lot longer than we thought.
Well, and again, just to develop a little bit more your review of the Fed, I mean, the Fed seems to be dancing to the tune that Trump has been playing now for 6 months. They're finally dancing to it, and they're sort of backfilling to try to keep going the good economy that tax cuts and deregulation and helped bring about. Now that tariffs are running interference into it by, as you said, suggesting that rates will be cut.
Yeah, but he's mentioning the stock market, or at least he's alluding to it, Fed Chairman Powell, and I don't like that. I mean, he's not really there. That's a pricing mechanism for what today's traders think the world's going to be doing in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, what have you. It's a voting mechanism, right? It's not an economic recovery mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I guess sometimes they are one and the same, but they really are. Most of the time, are not lockstep, right? So, for instance, we rallied hard, or we rallied during Obama's years when everything was horrible. So they don't have to be together, but I think it's very dangerous. And so, you'll have all these other pundits that come on your show or other shows that I do, and they all talk about the inverted yield curve, and not to make everybody's eyes glaze over that is listening to your show right now in the car, but that just means that 3-month interest rates are higher than 10-year interest rates. Okay, that shouldn't be the case. And when you see that most pundits will say that means there's an economic recession coming around the corner. Well, I'll say this. I think that is just a daily advertisement that the Fed got it wrong by raising rates in December because short-term rates are higher. And there's $10 trillion out there, Dan and Amy, that are priced at a negative interest rate in government bonds.
Mm-hmm.
So how in the heck are we supposed to have this roaring 10-year yield when Germany's 10-year yield is minus a quarter? And ours is at 2. So the question should be, why shouldn't it be inverted, right? So we'll probably get one of these rate hikes back with a cut coming soon, maybe, and some folks are talking. But I'm telling you right now, the way this smells to me is that 10-year yield that everybody keeps an eye on, which is around just over 2% right now, you can see that go below 1%. If the rest of the world continues to do what they're going to do, and the Draghi in Europe yesterday said he's willing to do whatever it takes to keep his economy going, and his economy's not going, which means more free money, deeper negative interest rates. So this is all shaping up to not be a really good time to stick your heels in the ground and have these huge tariff wars with China and Mexico.
And there's a distinction that needs to be made, right? Talking about the job market, even with unemployment at 3.6%, to the extent, as we say almost every month, that number means anything anymore. But yes, it's a robust jobs market, which tends to be a lagging indicator. But it's GDP growth and productivity that we should be looking at. And as that slows, ultimately the labor picture, the jobs picture will slow too.
Yes, and they are slowing. And that's the worry. To make it simple again, we're doing all the things, we're putting all this high octane fuel into our economy to try to jumpstart it and get it going. But what's coming out of the exhaust is not equal to what we've been putting in. It's just not. Somewhere along the line, we have a leak in our economic system that is giving us 3.6% unemployment rate. We just printed a 3% GDP, but we had wage growth declined this month. Average hourly earnings declined this month. How is that? I mean, those are part of the great unanswerables. How come we don't have, with a 30-year yield where it is today, a roaring housing market?
Mm-hmm.
These things aren't adding up, and I know that Powell's thinking about it. He won't talk about it. But I call them the great unanswerables because there is no answer. I mean, yes, we can say technology. We all kind of think that a little bit too. But I think it's more than just technology because technology also does bring in some good jobs. There's something happening with the economy and our productivity that cheap interest rates are taking the margins out of everything. And that's, I think, the biggest problem.
He is Scott Shellady, Scott the Cow Guy, Fox Business contributor. Scott, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, have a good weekend.
You too.
And he joins us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.